Welcome to Brave. Be inspired by the best leaders of Southeast Asia tech. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. I'm Jeremy Au, a VC, founder, and father. Join us for transcripts, analysis, and community at www.jeremyau.com. Hey, Elise, good to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jeremy.
I'm so excited to have you on the show because you're not only someone who's very excellent in understanding what startups need and being a bridge with fundraisers / fundraising / VCs in your various roles as a formal connector between those two worlds, but you're also with a big heart that has been doing a lot of, you could say, CSR or philanthropy or volunteerism and bringing that to the tech world, especially in the early stage startups, which is very rare and very new from my perspective. So I'm really excited to introduce you and your story to the world.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
So Elise, for those who don't know you yet, how would you introduce yourself professionally?
I am currently the founder of Asia Startup Network, which own the initiative Makan for Hope and Mentor for Hope, which Jeremy mentioned earlier, is really to bring a tech community together and also encouraging the spirit of giving back to the community. I also have a day job, so that is more like, pro bono, part-time. My day job is investor relations, so I'm leading that at LongHash Ventures, which is global blockchain fund and accelerator. I am actually on sabbatical for 3 months. I mean, some people are asking me, was it to organize the festival, the Makan for Hope Festival? Yes, maybe, but I actually just needed time for myself and with my daughter. My daughter is 2-year-old now. Yeah.
Amazing. I got to ask, how did the startup bug first bite you?
Basically, I was just thinking about the question earlier. I feel like I have actually always been enterprising since I'm young. The reason is that enterprising means that being resourceful, finding solutions, being opportunistic, right? So the reason is that my family was not well-to-do, and I really have to make do with limited resources and capital. So I think it is a natural fit, in terms of me being in the startup ecosystem and also just working in startup and even working as, an operator in a startup, right? But it really, I guess my understanding of entrepreneurship started when I went for the NUS Overseas College program when I was in, year 2 of university. So that was when, I really worked in what you will define as a startup in the US, and then also attending entrepreneurial courses at University of Pennsylvania. So that really helped me to better understand what it means to start a company and then what it means to run one.
Yeah, let's talk about that NOC because it's become a Mafia, as we always like to use the phrase, right? And I think there's a new article recently by Tech in Asia about how the NOC Mafia. So let's talk about what's so special about NOC. Isn't that just another outplacement program to stick some fresh undergrad into some startup somewhere in the world just to get some exposure? So what is it?
Yeah, I mean, this question comes up in my mind when I saw the Tech in Asia article as well. What makes this group of 3,000 alumni special, right? Maybe the interviewers, they saw something in us, something resourceful, enterprising, entrepreneurial in us. And then, when we go over to the different, we call valleys, just being able to work in startups, live and breathe that startup life, and also being on our own, right? Having to be forced to be independent and then trying to survive with the limited stipend we have. And then also being educated on the entrepreneurship modules. I think really, change our mindset and then show us what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I think really just being immersed in that environment help us to demystify a lot what people think about what entrepreneur is. And then, it just become natural, it become part of you because we literally spend a year over there. So a year is 365 days. Yeah, so that helps to kind of transform us into someone more entrepreneurial. And then secondly, definitely the network, whole community, how we support each other in our entrepreneurial growth. And I think it helps as well, to have role models. So for me, I would say that one of my role models was Go. So I worked for a short time in her startup, Audios Asia. And we were really just maybe smaller than a 10-man team. But what I really love is being able to solve the problem, think about new revenue streams, and then be able to execute on those ideas that we have like almost right away, and then immediately earn money for the company. Yeah, so that was like a really mind-blowing experience.
Yeah, so true. How does the NOC Mafia, article was talking about how this group stays in touch with each other and helps each other over time. And I think that's pretty special because there are lots of people who graduate from the National University of Singapore, any kind of like university program, but not every network helps each other along the way and stays in touch. So how do you see the NOC group and Mafia network help each other and stay in touch over time?
I would say, firstly, we have an email list. So there's someone with NUS Enterprise, working for NUS Enterprise, who diligently add all of us, to the mail list. So that helps in terms of disseminating information, sharing about events, jobs, and updates. And then secondly, the startup ecosystem is growing, but it's still pretty small in Singapore, right? The numbers, it shows we have 3,800, around 3,800 startups in Singapore. So given that it's relatively small network, it's just easier for all of us to bump each other or stay in touch. Yeah, and there's so many, before COVID-19, there were so many conferences, so many events that we would be able to attend and then just continue to stay in touch. So that helps. And then thirdly, I think most of us are in tech startups, and then in some way or another, it helps to work with each other. For example, it makes sense for Shopback to work with some of these B2C companies that have grown from the NOC Mafia, and just through working together, we stay together, right? Actually, I want to say something about the Mafia word, because I'm in blockchain, right? I feel like having an open ecosystem is so important, that we support each other, not because we are from the same background or the same network. Yeah, because ultimately what we want to do is to create better jobs. We want to create great companies that solve problems for solve problems which are painful, right? I mean, as much as I am privileged to be part of this NOC Mafia, I encourage all of us from this group to support other entrepreneurs, because it's only when we band together and we really put our head towards the common mission, of encouraging entrepreneurship, being able to grow startup companies together, that we will be able to realize the ultimate outcome, which is creating meaningful jobs, solving problems, creating great solutions for all.
There's an interesting dynamic, right? Which is the tension between closed networks that have that tight support, peer support, but also the desire to be open and give access to everybody, right? What happened to all of the poor NTU or SMU students, for those who are listening from overseas? These are different universities that are not part of the NOC Mafia, or they may be from different countries as well, right? So that's a big challenge. Do you feel like it's a tension, or do you feel like there's space for both types of networks?
Yeah, I think definitely there are ways to collaborate together. Even when we look at Singapore alone, Singapore is so small, 6 million people. And I can see that different universities are becoming open. For example, I would say SMU being really open in terms of, despite all the different background of the entrepreneurs, they would support them. And I think what helps as well is since last year, there are quite a few programs where it's just open to people from different background, and then being organized by this institution of higher learning. So I think gradually, really people will open up and work with each other, because that's the only way to grow more quickly, right? To share resources and not create overlaps and recreating the wheel. Yeah. So how can we partner with each other to be able to capitalize on the resources, the network, the capital that's already out there?
Yeah, and that's something that you not only think about, but you've actually, as they say, put money where your mouth is, in the sense that you've actually worked a lot in opening up access to folks, because you did that as an advisor to NUS Angels Ventures, which is working there. You've mentored social enterprises. You've been the head of funding at Entrepreneur First, connecting basically VCs with new founders who are very much often first-time founders, and vice versa. So what do you think is the dynamic there, right? Because aren't VCs supposed to do all the legwork in finding the founders? And aren't founders supposed to do all the legwork in finding VCs themselves, right? So why are you being... They use the word bo liao. It's a phrase. How do you explain bo liao? It's like, why are you just doing not appendix? You're like, You got nothing to do, is it? Why are you being a middleman or advisor in the middle? Why are you helping VCs find founders? Why are you helping founders talk to VCs?
That's a very interesting question. In the perfect world, the VC will find the right startups and the startups will find the right VCs. But then what we have is an imperfect world. And the truth is that if you have a great network, you do find your VC more easily. And that applies to other parts of life, right? And I think for me, it's really thinking about how do I provide a platform how do I create platforms that enable the matchmaking to happen more easily. And sometimes I also think about, am I reinventing the wheel? Are there other platforms that are already there? So that's how I started working with NUS Angels Ventures, and I'm really open to working with other organizations as well, because if it's already out there, then why duplicate our efforts and all that? It's more meaningful to work together. Yeah, and I think there is so much attached to. Just I mentioned about dynamics, right? So I think there's a lot of emotions attached to being able to prove that you have made certain achievements, right? So let's say for accelerators, you are looking at how can you do shout out of your startups who have done well and all that. And then if you are an association, you're trying to do that as well. So who is the mother of success, for certain startups that made it? So for me, I think that we can't help it, we can't help it that people will become like close network just so they can really be able to articulate that achievements that they will be able to realize. But then I also strongly urge about thinking about like the overall, the big picture, the overall outcome, like what do we really want? Like what we really want is to grow the ecosystem over in Singapore and in Asia, right? So that we may be able to even become the Silicon Valley of Asia, the hub for startups for Singapore. So it's when we kind of alleviate ourselves to think of like the overall goal that may change the dynamics and also unite us to work together.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's a huge goal and a very meaningful one to go for that. Since you've worked with so many startups and you've worked with so many VCs, what's something that you wish every startup just knew from day one? Like this one lesson that you wish you didn't have to repeat over and over again, that you just wish that you just like, I don't know, was just imprinted. What lessons would you want them to know upfront?
Sure. Thanks for asking this question. So I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think being an entrepreneur first has inspired me to think this way. So meaning that for startup founders, the journey to start a great company is really a difficult one. So I strongly urge that you find something which you can do. And then secondly, that you love to do. And then thirdly, that the world needs your skills, your solution. So to summarize this, you can actually refer to the ikigai concept, the Japanese concept. I think that is really what keeps me going all the time, because investor relations, connecting people is something that I can do because I've been doing that for the past few years. And then secondly, is something that I love to do because I just love to be helping people, seeing that they realize their goals and being able to connect to people who then have great working relationship together or end up investing to each other, And then thirdly is just supporting the startups, helping them to create the companies that will solve the problem, of the world. Is something that the world needs. So I've really encouraged founders to create a business that resonates with you, that you can do, that you love to do, because then that will see you through the dark times. They will see you through like the obstacles that you face. And that will help you to make the right decision all the time, because it's really difficult to make this decision on the fly. So that's something that I would want to repeat to all founders that I meet.
That's so true, right? Which is, it's not just about the product market fit, which is what every founder is trying to go for on a logical/business side. But it's also about whether they fit with the market and the problem, the founder market fit, whether they actually love what they're solving before actually going to build it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so true. And I didn't expect that answer. But when you say that way, I think there's something, I often wish was there for a lot of folks, right? Because being a founder is really not easy. Probability adjusted, you're probably not going to get more economic returns than working at a normal company. So you got to love what you're doing and trying to tackle. What advice do you have for founders who have ended up building a company that is successful or doing some interesting signals, they're out fundraising, but they're at some level, they may not really love what they're solving. I see a lot, right? There's a lot of university students, they're like, okay, I'm going to tackle food and beverage because I know that's a problem I want to solve. And after what they do it, they're like, whoa, that FMB is actually a bit different than what I thought, but as a market signal. So what advice do you have for that?
Yeah, and I think interestingly, I was just speaking with Sam, who founded Endowers yesterday. So the thing is, our company that we built, evolve over time as well, and expectation may become misaligned. Both of us, what we're talking about is also finding the fit for yourself, in terms of the role that you play within the company, because it depends on who you are as a person. It depends on what you love to do. It depends on whether the role that you play makes sense when communicating to investors, to customers. To answer your question, I think it's more of like, the company has grown and, kind of things have changed along the way. So what next, right, for this founder? I would say, that play a different role in the company. I think quite commonly people become chairman, take on a chairman position or director position rather than an operational role when the company become mature to a certain stage. So that could be one solution. But I think stop you from really selling off your shares to someone else, whom you think can really continue the mission and continue to build this company and continue to deliver the promise to the customers. Yeah, so there's just many ways of solving this problem. Yeah, but I think firstly, it's so important to make sure that you love yourself, you love what you're doing, because when that happens, everything flows. So only you know the answer. Yeah.
That's really good advice, and I'm glad you shared that. What advice would you give for VCs that you wish every VC knew?
I don't know whether I'm able to say something smart about this. Yeah, because now I'm thinking about the VCs that I work with. They are guys who've been able to raise 200 million and 400 million. Who am I to say what they should do? Thanks to the people whom I meet across the past year, it's really about changing the mindset to think about people before profits and just running a sustainable organization. Even myself, sometimes I think about how do I become effective at my work? How do I make choices? Do I optimize based on the KPI that I'm given? And then if I optimize on that, would I sacrifice some of my moral values to reach the goal? And I would say that I'm not perfect, right? So I have times where I think about I must achieve those objectives so that I'll be getting that bonus. But then now that I've gone through what I've gone through in the past few years, I think that it's so much more important to put people before profits, or put your values before profits. Because at the end of the day, or even on your own, on the deathbed, you can tell yourself that you can answer to yourself, what you have done. Yeah, so I think really putting that perspective is quite important.
That's a tough one, right? Because every VC is throwing millions of dollars to achieve a certain... Yeah, they chose to achieve a certain net IRR, internal rate of return for the limited partners. You also know them because you met them before as well.
Yeah.
So everyone's trying to hit a certain level of targets. And the founders all signed on without fully understanding 25% net IRR means in terms of the actual growth rate. Because they need to not only grow for themselves, but to grow for the other 90% of the portfolio that's not going to make it.
Yeah.
So they got to work even harder than that, right?
Yeah. But mindsets are changing. For example, I was just speaking to someone there's a tool where you can analyze the VC, Preqin. So they actually have a filter for companies, VC firms that are ESG, that have the ESG mindset and focus. Yeah, I wouldn't say ESG would simply means, values before profit or people before profit, right? But what I'm saying is that the world is changing. The world is moving towards more of thinking about, besides measuring outcomes based on money, how else can we measure the outcome of what we are doing? And also investors' mindset, investors meaning the limited partners, right? Investors that invest into these funds, their mindset are also changing. The objectives are changing as well, I do feel hopeful. We are thinking about more of objective other than profits, other than the IRR.
But it's tough because it feels like as the VC level is if I care about it, but lots of other people don't care about it, the other people who don't care about it will get to do better performance and report better net IRR, which allows them to raise more funds from LPs who fundamentally, I feel like they care only about the net returns at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for that conversation? If we all agreed that we will surrender 5% of net IRR to improve the world, I think we can all agree to that as a collective action.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of a prisoner's dilemma, which is why should I focus on ESG when other people are not? So what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, it's such a difficult question to answer, but I would say that sometimes like data, being able to analyze the data of your past portfolio, you may uncover interesting trends because we always think that maybe a very fast-growing company or in a solving a problem where you serve the biggest group of people who are willing to pay and able to pay, that will mean a golden egg opportunity, right? But then what if there's a business that you can invest into that do good, and yet maybe in 3 years it won't give you the IRR that you want, but it's going to give you the profit that you want on a more sustainable basis, just because it is a more constant, the business model is something that you need to build slowly over time. Yeah, so I think all I'm describing maybe is something like a social enterprise model or something like, yeah. So how would this actually help to diversify the risk of your portfolio? And so I think maybe this is really going back to the data and seeing, are there assumptions made that could be challenged? Are there assumptions made that on getting to that profit that you promise your limited partners? Is there a way of changing that model so that you actually are able to deliver somewhat and yet is on a sustainable basis? Yeah, I'm sorry I'm saying things in a really vague term, but to borrow an analogy, right? I think I'm quite inspired by like microfinancing kind of projects. I don't have the numbers here, but what I know is that when you give microloans to people, let's say, really have $3 to $6 a day to survive, what people realize over time is that the percentage of loans that are paid back is super high compared to loaning it to some other groups of people. So hypothetically, you may be funding a company that seems to give you lower returns, but then the performance might be good consistently over time, right? Compared to another startup that will grow really quickly in a short time, but later on, the growth tapers. Yeah, so it's about thinking about the assumptions that you have made, challenging that, and also thinking about how can you diversify your portfolio so that you do deliver sustainable returns and not just short-term growth.
How should founders think about that? Because you want to be mindful that investors are thinking about ESG outcomes slowly over time. And I think a lot of founders also care about it on a personal level and they see it that way. But they're worried that when they pitch, they don't want to come across as a tie-dye, Berkeley hippie, which I am, right? But also they want to focus on that. They want to show some of the East Coast, Harvard capitalism into the deck and everything. So how would you recommend like founders think about articulating that sense of mission and purpose, tying in some ESG, tying in also like the return dynamic? How do you coach or help people through that?
I don't think I can answer your question directly, but what I've been doing is giving a talk on the topic, finding funding for your startup. And what I share about is that finding VC funding for your startup is not the only way. There are grants, there are angel funding, there are family offices, bootstrapping as well, friends and family. All of this, they do have a different like investment horizon, expectations, right, compared to the VC investors. So thinking about the different options and also thinking about like what kind of lifestyle, what kind of investors you want to have on your cap table. Because if you raise from VC, given the kind of expectation their own investors have, the kind of lifestyle you're going to have is really definitely going to be quite hectic because you need to achieve that numbers and growth matrix and all that. Yeah, but conversely, if you were to bootstrap, you were to apply for grants, you would raise from family offices who invest in your vertical, things may look quite different. And even philanthropists, yeah. So it really depends on what you want. And sometimes it's about the fit for the kind of business you are running. And I would also say that there's no shame in bootstrapping. That there's people would think that being funded by VC is such an honorable thing, right? It is something that you can really shout about and all that. But the thing is, go back to the fundamentals, right? Go back to why you want to start a business. why you want to start a business? Because you see that there's a gap and you want to solve that problem. You want to create a solution that is effective, that makes sense for your customers. So when you think of it that way, right, then I would say that why do you mind so much about the glory of being funded by a particular investor or by a VC, right? It's more about thinking about how can you raise enough funding, how do you grow your company sustainably so that you can achieve the outcome you would like to see, and then being kind of really prudent with the shareholding, the shares that you're giving away. So I think when you think about it that way, then maybe the decision that you make will be different.
Yeah. I like how you, as a bridge between VCs and startups, are saying, hey, VC is not all that it's cracked up to be, right?
No, I think in every decision that you make, there are pros and cons. So it's more. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to take funding from VC. It is good, it's great. Some of the VC, for example, Monks Hill, you guys give so much support to the portfolio companies. But I think more of the startup founders being able to make the right decision for themselves and for their company. I think it's important to also realize that bootstrapping is cool. It's still cool. Like, there are so many companies like GitHub, like GoPro, that actually bootstrap and later on become acquired. So there's beauty in bootstrapping.
I love it. I too am a big believer in bootstrapping. I always tell people, it's like my grandfather saved money from the plantation, working on the plantation to set up a provision shop. And it's called bootstrapping today.
Yes.
But, that was the only way to build a business at that time, like British Malaya, right? Working on a rubber plantation is called. I think, so it's weird. It's upside down. Couldn't get money from a bank, let alone a venture capitalist, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way I think you have to build a business. And I think the crux of what you're just saying is like, the business is first, right? The fundraising or the funding is really the secondary piece of it.
Yes.
One interesting part is, obviously, your role, you see a bell curve of founders, right? At that one point of time. Now, when I say bell curve, it doesn't mean they're average forever or they're great forever. But at the moment that they pitch, some founders have stronger pitches that in terms of their deck. Some people have stronger businesses fundamentals, and some people have very strong presentation skills, right? And of course, in the perfect world, all three of those things align. So like great business, great deck, great communication equals one of those blockbuster VC rounds that we see all over the Ken and Tech in Asia and so forth. And obviously for them, if you're listening to this podcast, like, don't worry about it. You're going to crush it anyway. But for everybody else, it's a struggle to get there, right? Your business may not be fully there where you want it to be as you thought or planning a year ago. You know that you're not as strong a founder, speaker, seller as you could be for VCs, because who has ever sold a company to a VC? In terms of pitching, is like a totally new skill. And then, of course, it takes a lot of work to actually also build out the pitch deck and storyboard. So it's a lot of work. How do you advise founders to get there and improve themselves to be ready in front of other people and VCs?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's really difficult to be a founder, to fundraise, to have everything that the VCs or the investor is looking for. There are many options, that obviously there's accelerator program, so enter entrepreneur first, and also other vertical focus programs. I think a lot of them are super helpful in supporting founders getting there. Of course, it depends on what is the founder's kind of expectation, what is the gap that the founders have. Because often for programs like that, it runs for at least 3 months, and you start on a certain date and end on a certain date. So that has some kind of implication on like timeline of the company. Yeah. So, and also it's often it's a program for more than 10 people, right? So it has to be quite sometimes generic. So you kind of have to wait for a particular class to, if you know you have a gap, and you have to wait for that particular class in order to be able to start working on a gap. So I think accelerator program, all that is one way. And then the second way is also maybe joining a network. I heard of C founders. I'm sure there are other organizations where there are mentors, who can support you, how you address your gap. This could be a good option. So for me, I actually have been thinking about this as well. How do we support founders? Is there something that we can create which is not bound by time. People don't have to wait like 3 months to go into a program and then work on the gaps. Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe of like more of a digital venture builder kind of program where, there are like relationship managers that would help you to look at your business right now, what are the gaps, and even yourself as a founder, address those gaps and then bring in either advisors or mentors who can help coach you over time so that, get you to a stage where you are ready for the next funding round. So let's say if the next stage is angel round, then, we will work on certain aspects that bring you to that stage that you're angel investor ready. And then after the angel stage, right, then help you with certain areas like, for example, hiring your CXO so that you can, and also helping you with validation, MVP building, then you can get to the next stage of seed fundraising. Yeah, and so on until you kind of raise Series A and then you graduate from the system in a way. And what I've been thinking about is also, how can we provide part-time CXO? How can we provide non-core service providers at a bulk discount rate for these entrepreneurs so that they don't have to spend so much time on the time wasters, meaning like trying to spend time to interview and find the right person, which is the right fit for your culture, and also to really just trying to assemble a list of investors that you should talk to and then like kind of arranging meetings after meetings with them. Yeah, so how can I help to really remove these time wasters so that what founders are looking at is saving them half year to 1 year and then being able to go to market much more quickly. I mean, this is my idea, but I haven't really got started with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. One thing that we've talked about in the past as well is that, you not only have a heart, obviously, for founders who are kind of thinking about how to process and pitch themselves and prepare the business and build it out. You're also very thoughtful about making sure there's access for every founder as well. So minorities and especially women is something that you think about in terms of helping them get to the next level. Could you share with me, obviously, because it can feel like, and I'm not saying that I agree with this, I'm just saying, you can feel like this is a problem that is an American problem because the news about minorities not being able to access funding, all of the research is on female founders not having access to funding in the States, that is discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. And if I was cynical, I could be like, we don't see any of that research in Asia. There's no proof that women are struggling to fundraise or to do that stuff. What would be your response about what the reality is for female founders in Southeast Asia?
Sure, yeah. The fact that there is very little report, the fact that there is little coverage about what's really happening on the ground, doesn't mean that the problem didn't exist. Yeah, it just means that maybe on a demand and supply level of media, it is not or like in the report, it's not worth doing it yet in Asia. Yeah, I'm a member of SheVC, which is started by NUS Ventures. The founders include Pocket, Sun. Yeah, so we often talk about the gaps for female founders in the US and also globally. There is actually really quite a bit of a gap. And also yesterday I was speaking to just chatting with Steve, who co-founded Property Guru. He's part of the enterprise organization. Then they were discussing that the gender ratio in Singapore and Asia for our female founders is like 20%, 20 to 80, right? 20% of female and 80% male, right? And when you compare that on, I think the US on a global level, it's actually 30%. So actually we are below the global level, despite the fact that we are a developed country, right? Despite the fact that we think women do have sufficient rights to the kind of education and employment that we should have. There's a lot of undercurrents when it comes to female entrepreneurship, things that is not out there. Yeah, and I think why I feel that way is because I do see female founders struggling. I do see the lack of support, and I do see because of how the society thinks, the kind of really entrenched beliefs and mindset that we have, the bias, subconscious bias that we have that pose as obstacles that people don't see because it's just it's not something tangible. Yeah. Why I think that way is because at Entrepreneur First, there are quite a few female founders. When I see some of the struggles they go through, especially when they are fundraising, So there's one example I remember clearly was she is fundraising, and then one of the investors asked her, if I invest in you, what will happen when you get pregnant? What will happen when you have a child? How can I be sure that the business is still going to go on, right? How am I going to deliver that expectations to my investors and shareholders? Yeah. And then also, I think Shawnee and I, we discussed a little bit on, it's not female only, but it's more like some investors are quite particular about finding couples who start their businesses together because they are worried that their relationship would be the risk, right, for making sure the business carry on. Yeah. The life stage that women go through pose as an issue when you start a business. Or maybe it doesn't pose as an issue, if you have a great support system, but there is that subconscious mindset and bias that investors can have towards females. I wouldn't say that it is the fault of the VC investor to think that way, right? Because after all, they are being responsible for the outcome that they bring to the investors. But I'm just thinking, what else can society provide? What kind of support can the government give? What kind of programs, initiatives, even grants, that can be given to female founders? Or like even from the media partners' point of view, what can they do to help profile female founders so that altogether, we can make things easier for female. We can allow more females to become successful, and then they can become role models for others to follow. Yeah, there's just so much that we can do, little ways that we can support, and together these little ways become a wave or something of change, right, for female founders. Yeah.
And I think it's amazing because you are someone who, again, walks the talk because you do actually spend that time, not just systematically coaching all founders, but also making sure to invest in helping other female and minority founders. And I've seen you do that, as well as use some of those events and campaigns to donate to charities as well, the underserved in society. So you really do that. So I got to ask, I think a lot of males, myself included, in technology, we kind of want to be helpful and allies, but also, frankly, we feel like it's like not our space. We don't want to come across as the guy helping women in a paternalistic way, or worst case, come across as creepy, right? That'd be even worse, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean? So, don't get me wrong. I'm going to flat out say that there are creepy people out there. Not trying to defend them. They should be blacklisted and blackballed from my perspective. But I think there's a good group of people who just be like, okay, we understand that systematically women are not being well served as founders and so on and so forth. And I'm supportive of women leaders to support them. And I should back off because I don't want to be seen as being very all up for no reason. So I don't know, what advice do you have for, I guess, the incumbents, the guys out there about how they should be thinking about how to help and be an ally to female founders?
I think this is an interesting question. I would say that female founders don't require favoritism. We don't require special treatment because if we are capable, the results will show. But I think maybe empathy is important because there will be times where, we can't be in office. We have family obligations, yeah. But I'm sure, female founders who are responsible, they will still keep the business running, right? There's still someone who is a backup, who is there to hold like the stage while she's not around. Yeah. So I think having the empathy and also the belief that the woman is responsible enough to keep the business running is important, will be helpful. And then secondly is, I think I love what Cocoon Capital does. So I know Michael Blakey well because he invested in EF companies in London and then now in Singapore as well. So what Cocoon Capital organizes is a female founder only mentoring session. I'm not sure if it happens every quarter or like every half a year. But I think, really just coming up with programs, initiatives like that is quite tailored to female founders. Because after all, there are some differences between supporting female founders and male founders to some extent, which I mentioned, like empathy being one. And also the way female founders would run organization could be a bit different. Yeah, just because we have that feminine side, right? And then, and oftentimes I think that mother instinct towards employees, yeah. So the way we run businesses will be quite different. Yeah, so I think having this kind of like female tailored initiative can be really helpful. And also, I think something that I would look into doing as well is providing virtual discussion forums where female founders have that safe space to share like the challenges they face. And I think just knowing that they are not alone is helpful already. And of course, if people, female founders within a session can support each other, can either through sharing their own experiences, how they overcome their experiences, what kind of solution they have made use of that has been helpful to solve their problems, could be really helpful. Yeah. So in fact, this is quite timely because I am organizing this female founder closed-door roundtable discussion during Makan for Hope Festival with Qing Ru, who is the co-founder of Zoopim and now board director at ACE. So we are going to invite female founders from different stages of their startup, as well as ecosystem partners, and then start talking about what are the issues that female founders face and what could be some of the potential solutions. And I think this initial conversation could spark off to more conversation, more people thinking about how to solve these issues, and then perhaps together we can create more support for female founders.
Thank you so much. Starting to turn to the last chapter here, you've been someone who has really done a lot for the Singapore and Southeast Asia ecosystem. Have there been tough times where you've had to choose to be brave?
If you have seen some of my interviews with like CNA 938 or my own blog, then you may know that my family background has been relatively low income, and I do have to make do right growing up. And then when it's time for me to apply for universities, there was a time where I actually was quite fortunate to receive the provisional offer for the SAF scholarship. Because SAF stands for Singapore Armed Forces. I actually went through 6 months of being in the BMT, which is basic military training, and then later on 3 months in the officer cadet school. I was also awarded the best physical trainee twice. I actually didn't follow on with the scholarship because ironically, the 3 months made me realize that I'm not a good fit as a military personnel. Yeah, it's not me to think about attack strategies, to think about how do I fire a gun at somebody. So I actually walked away from the scholarship. But what helps as well is that I didn't do well in my last interview because I was so tired after a 7-day boot camp where I didn't sleep. I didn't have time to prepare for my interview. I wasn't awarded the SAF Merit Scholarship. I was awarded the SAF Academic Overseas Scholarship instead. Yeah. So I decided to walk away, even though I know I would probably have troubles like trying to pay off my university school fees. Yeah. But I know that I can't go through the 6 years of a bond that I have to serve after that because my heart wouldn't be in it. And looking back, I'm quite glad that the time I was 18 or 19 years old and I had that realization because like right now what I'm doing, right, I wouldn't have chosen a different path.
Wow, that must have been so scary, right? Because, I mean, obviously I also did the military service as well. I was fortunate to have 2 female instructors who gave me a very different view on the army back then. But I can imagine as you coupled with the fact that you were gunning for that scholarship to help you cover your school fees with conjunction with your family situation, it must have been tough. How did you feel? Like you must have been so scary to just, I don't know, send in that rejection/withdrawal email or letter, right? I don't know how you did it. Can you tell us what it was like, walking away?
I need to also build on what you say just now, that it's not just about the security of paying for my university fees. It's also that I know if I say yes, probably I have career life that is charted out for me, right? So why do I want to choose a more difficult and uncertain path? I think at the time, I don't know, I think maybe it was more of a really serious discussion with my father. And then I told him that I really don't see myself having a military career. And he was supportive of what I was thinking at the time. Obviously, he do hope that I take on a scholarship because that will lessen the burden for our family because I have another sister. She's 4 years younger. And then she also wants to have a university education, right? I think it was really putting the perspective of what I want to do with my life that helped me to find the courage to make that decision. Of course, it takes some time, right? It took some time to come to that decision finally. But really glad that I made the decision. Yeah, I'm not saying that having a military career is not good for female and all that. I think it is because I see so many of my friends who do have fulfilling military career. But then I realized that it's just not for me. And then I couldn't be happier being where I am.
What a tough decision to make, right? That would be a tough one, for sure. Yeah, I can imagine that being a tough decision. And again, I love the fact that you very much rhymes with what advice you give to founders as well, right? About being in the place that you love and loving yourself to enough and valuing yourself enough to do something that you want to do. In this case, for your case, not doing something that society and the army wanted for you as well. So, wow, well, that's rough. Well, starting to wrap things up here, Elise, thank you so much. I want to kind of summarize the 3 big themes that I saw surface from this. I think the first, of course, was just thank you so much for sharing about your experience as someone who is thoughtful about being exposed to technology and being a role, being a bridge, and what you love about being a bridge and communicator and your heart for both startups and VCs and helping translate that. And I thought that was a very nice dynamic where you got to talk about your trajectory, but also the things you learned. And that brings us to the second theme, which is, I love the advice that you gave to both founders and VCs. Of course, for founders, very counterintuitive because normally most people advise, the VCs give is like, find product market fit, make more money, become profitable. And you're just very much like, whoa, hey, you encouraging a founder to do what they love and to find that ikigai, right? It's just amazing advice about how to be thoughtful about the role, how to change your role for yourself and for the company. And I thought it was just really good advice. In parallel, also, I love the advice that you gave to VCs about being thoughtful about, people and profit and about, the upside of, you can call it ESG, but also being thoughtful about the impact of society. And of course, lastly, I really appreciate you talking about the last chunk, which is about you being thoughtful about your own personal journey over time, about respecting yourself. And I think there's a big theme where I see and hear about how you struggled in the past and how you overcame that struggle. And I love the fact that you're helping other people go through that same process and learning that you did in the past in the context of just founders, but also female founders who are looking to get past the barriers that bar them from access to capital and the next stage of the business. So Elise, thank you so much for being someone who not just talks the walk, but also walks the talk and has proven it multiple times, honestly. So I really respect you about that. Yeah. Thank you, Elise.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the interview. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share this episode with friends and colleagues. Sign up at www.jeremyau.com to discuss this episode with other community members in our forum. Stay well and stay brave.